Hey there, deep divers. You wanted to explore economic inequality and what we can learn from ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And wow, you sent in a ton of material, podcast scripts, excerpts, all sorts of things.
Yeah, a lot to dig into.
So we're diving deep into the world of togas and gladiators
Right?
to uncover some surprisingly relevant insights.
I think you might be surprised by how much ancient Rome has to teach us
Yeah.
about wealth,
Uh-huh.
about power, and maybe even about human nature.
It's like looking in a historical mirror.
It really is.
Because imagine a society so unequal that it eventually crumbles under the weight of its own wealth disparity.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, that's ancient Rome
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell. But by looking at their rise and fall,
Right.
I think we can unearth some seriously valuable lessons about economic balance power dynamics
Yeah.
and how to maybe avoid a similar fate for ourselves.
Well, to understand Rome's struggles with inequality, we first need to understand how their society was structured.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Can you paint us a picture of ancient Roman society? Sure. What was the economic hierarchy like?
Okay, so picture this. A pyramid
Okay.
with a very pointy top. At the very apex
Okay.
were the patricians,
Uh-huh.
the elite class, who held most of the land,
Yeah.
wealth, and political power. They were the senators,
Right.
the generals, the landowners,
Gotcha.
basically the 1%ers of ancient Rome.
And everyone else, where do they fit into this pyramid scheme?
Everyone else was crammed into the much larger base of the pyramid.
Oh, boy.
They were the plebeians,
Uh-huh.
the commoners.
Yeah.
This included your artisans,
You can-
laborers,
Yeah.
shopkeepers, and small-scale farmers.
Mhm.
And they had significantly less economic and political clout compared to those patricians at the top.
So we're already seeing a pretty stark divide here
Yeah.
between the elites and everyone else.
Right.
But how did Rome's famous military conquests
Uh-huh.
impact this economic landscape? Did all that loot and plunder trickle down?
Well, military conquest brought a huge influx of both wealth and slaves into Rome. But guess who benefited most?
Let me guess.
The patricians.
You got it, the patricians.
Of course.
This wealth fueled the rise of massive estates called latifundia.
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 Okay.
You provided us with a source that described them stretching for miles, worked by thousands of slaves.
Wow.
These giant slave-powered farms basically dominated the agricultural scene.
Wow, these latifundia sound massive. No wonder the average Roman farmer trying to make a living couldn't keep up. What happened to them?
They were squeezed out. They couldn't compete.
Yeah.
Many were forced to sell their land and migrate to the cities, swelling the ranks of the urban poor.
So we're seeing the seeds of economic inequality being sown right there.
Exactly.
This mass migration to the cities must have created some serious social tension, right?
Right.
You've got all these people,
Yeah.
many of them former farmers,
Mm-hmm.
crammed into Rome with limited opportunities.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that went over well.
You're right. Roman leaders were acutely aware of this brewing discontent.
They needed a way to placate the growing urban poor population to keep them from getting restless. And that's where this concept of bread and circuses comes in.
Ooh, bread and circuses. Tell me more about that. It sounds fun.
Well, to keep the masses content,
Uh-huh.
Roman leaders implemented policies to provide free grain, known as the annona,
Okay.
and put on lavish public entertainment. Think gladiatorial combats, chariot races, public festivals,
Wow.
all designed to distract people from their economic hardships.
So basically they were giving them food and entertainment
Yeah,
to keep them happy and distracted.
exactly.
It's a strategy that feels eerily familiar even today, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Think about how much time and energy people spend consuming entertainment and social media. It can be a very effective way to keep people from focusing on deeper societal issues.
It's a really interesting parallel.
Yeah.
And while it might seem like a cynical strategy, the bread and circuses policy did provide a degree of social stability, at least for a while.
Yeah.
It kept the peace,
Yeah.
but did it address the root cause of the problem?
That's the big question, right?
Right.
They were treating the symptoms, not the disease.
Yeah.
Did anyone try to tackle this issue of economic inequality head on?
As a matter of fact, yes. Two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, tried to change the system. They weren't content with just Band-Aid solutions like bread and circuses.
Okay, so these Gracchi brothers
Yeah.
were like the Robin Hoods of ancient Rome,
You could say that.
fighting for the little guy.
Yeah, they were reformers who recognized the inherent injustice of this massive wealth gap
Mm-hmm.
and were determined to do something about it.
Okay.
Tiberius, in particular, spearheaded a movement for land reform. His goal was to redistribute land from the wealthy elite back to the poor,
Wow.
essentially breaking up those giant latifundia estates we talked about earlier.
That sounds like a pretty bold move. What did the Roman Senate pact with wealthy patricians?
Hmm.
Think about that. I can't imagine they were too happy about the idea of giving up their land and wealth.
You're exactly right. The Senate was vehemently opposed to Tiberius's reforms.
Yeah.
They saw it as a direct attack on their wealth and power. The pushback was fierce.
So what happened? Was Tiberius able to push through his land reform?
Tragically, no. He was assassinated in 133 BCE, a testament to the powerful forces he was up against.
Wow, talk about putting your life on the line for your beliefs.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the risks that come with challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
even when change is desperately needed.
Absolutely. And actually, his brother Gaius picked up the mantle and continued the fight for reform, but he met a similar fate.
It's heartbreaking that both brothers were killed for trying to create a fairer society. Their story really highlights how deeply entrenched the power structures were in ancient Rome. And this brings us to another critical factor in Roman inequality: slavery. We can't talk about economic disparity in ancient Rome without acknowledging the role of slavery.
Absolutely. Slavery was deeply intertwined with Rome's economy and its growing wealth gap.
So let's go deeper into that. Explain how slavery exacerbated economic inequality in Roman society.
Think of it this way. Slaves represented a cheap and readily available source of labor. As Rome's conquests expanded, so too did its slave population. This created a significant advantage for the wealthy elite, who could exploit this labor force on their vast estates and in various industries.
So the rich got richer,
Yeah.
while the poor,
Hmm.
unable to compete with slave labor,
Right.
were left further behind.
Precisely. Slavery created a vicious cycle.
Sure.
Wealthy landowners could produce goods and services more cheaply, undercutting free citizens trying to earn a living. This in turn drove down wages and limited job opportunities for the average Roman.
It's a stark reminder of how unfair labor practices can really skew the economic playing field. This had to contribute to even more social unrest and instability.
Without a doubt. The presence of a large exploited slave population fueled resentment and created an underclass ripe for exploitation.
Yeah.
This simmering tension added to the instability of Roman society.
Okay, so we've talked about the stark class divisions, the influx of wealth and slaves from conquests,
Right.
the failed attempts at reform,
Yeah.
and the role of slavery in exacerbating inequality. It's a pretty grim picture so far. What else was brewing beneath the surface of this seemingly glorious empire?
Well, when you have such a massive concentration of wealth in the hands of a few,
Yeah.
another problem inevitably arises: corruption.
Yes. Corruption. The age-old companion of power and wealth. Tell me more about how economic inequality fueled corruption in Roman politics.
It's a classic tale. The wealthy elite, with their vast fortunes,
Right.
use their resources to influence politicians and shape policies to benefit their own interests.
Yeah.
Think of it as a very early form of lobbying.
So basically, a government that's supposed to represent the people ends up serving the interests of the wealthy few. Sounds familiar.
Indeed. It's a pattern that we see throughout history.
Can you give us some specific examples of corruption in ancient Rome? How did this play out in practice?
One example is the role of the publicani. They were private individuals or companies who were contracted by the Roman government to collect taxes,
Okay.
especially in the provinces.
So like outsourced tax collectors.
Yes, and the problem was they were notorious for exploiting their positions,
Uh-oh.
often squeezing excessive sums from the populace to line their own pockets.
So it was a system ripe for abuse. The publicani, driven by greed, could exploit the people with little oversight or accountability.
Right.
No wonder resentment towards the Roman government grew.
Exactly. Corruption erodes trust in institutions, breeds cynicism, and creates a sense of unfairness. All of this contributed to the destabilization of Roman society.
It's a domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
Economic inequality leads to the concentration of power,
Yeah.
which then paves the way for corruption
Right.
and ultimately undermines the stability of the entire system.
That's a great way to put it. It's a cycle that has repeated itself throughout history.
So we've established that ancient Rome was grappling with some serious issues: a massive wealth gap, social unrest, and rampant corruption. all fueled by economic inequality. Where do we go from here? What's
Yeah.
the next chapter in this Roman saga?
Well, all of these factors we've discussed,
Yeah.
the inequality, the social unrest, the corruption, they didn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
They were all interconnected and ultimately played a significant role in Rome's eventual decline.
Are you saying that economic inequality contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire? That's a pretty bold claim.
It might sound dramatic, but the evidence suggests that economic imbalance played a key role in weakening the foundations of Roman society. It made them more susceptible to internal strife and external pressures.
So it's like this epic domino effect, right?
Yep.
One imbalance triggers another, and eventually the whole system collapses. That's a sobering thought. But hey, maybe Rome's misfortune can be our gain. What lessons can we learn from this 2,000-year-old cautionary tale?
Rome's experience offers some really powerful and timeless truths about economic inequality and its impact on societies.
Okay.
For starters, it underscores the importance of balanced wealth distribution
Okay.
for social stability. When the gap between the rich and the poor becomes too wide,
Yeah.
it creates resentment, instability, and, as we've seen, can contribute to a society's downfall.
Yeah, a society where a tiny elite hoards all the wealth while the majority struggles to survive
Right.
is a recipe for disaster. So how do we avoid falling into that same trap?
That's where we can draw upon those lessons from Rome. Remember the bread and circuses policy.
Yeah.
It highlights a crucial point about social welfare programs.
What's that?
They should empower people, not create dependency.
Okay.
While providing immediate relief is sometimes necessary, the ultimate goal should be to equip individuals with the tools and opportunities to become self-sufficient.
Okay, so sustainable solutions over quick fixes.
Exactly.
Got it. But let's be real. Economic inequality is a complex issue. It's not just about social welfare programs, right?
Absolutely. We also need to look at the dangers of concentrated wealth and power, something Rome clearly struggled with.
Yeah.
When a small group controls most of the resources and influences political decisions,
Right.
it creates fertile ground for corruption.
And as we've seen, corruption erodes trust in institutions, breeds cynicism, and further destabilizes society.
Exactly.
It's a vicious cycle.
Precisely. And let's not forget about the role of fair labor practices.
Right.
Rome's reliance on slavery is a stark example of how an exploitative labor system can perpetuate and exacerbate economic inequality. We need to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to participate in the economy and earn a living wage.
So to recap, Rome's story is teaching us about the importance of balanced wealth distribution, empowering social welfare programs, addressing corruption,
Right.
and ensuring fair labor practices.
Those are some heavy-hitting lessons.
Yeah, they really are.
Okay.
But are they really relevant to our world today?
Mhm.
It's not like we have gladiator fights and chariot races anymore.
You might be surprised. While the specifics might differ,
Okay.
the underlying dynamics are remarkably similar.
Okay.
Think about the current debates we have about income inequality, social safety nets,
Yeah.
the influence of money in politics, and workers' rights. These are all echoes of the same fundamental challenges that Rome faced centuries ago.
Wow, I never thought I'd be taking economic advice from ancient Romans.
Right.
But you're right, their struggles do offer a unique perspective on issues that are still very much alive today. So how do we apply these lessons to our modern context?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Let's break it down.
Okay.
First, when it comes to balanced wealth distribution,
Okay.
we need to consider policies that promote economic opportunity for everyone, not just a select few. This could involve things like progressive taxation,
Yeah.
investments in education and job training, and support for small businesses.
So creating a system that allows for upward mobility and a more equitable sharing of the economic pie.
Exactly. Next, we need to reevaluate our approach to social welfare programs.
Okay.
Are they designed to simply provide temporary relief,
Right.
or do they truly empower people to break free from the cycle of poverty?
Yeah.
The focus should be on investing in human capital,
Okay.
equipping individuals with the skills and resources they need to become self-sufficient.
Okay, so moving beyond handouts and focusing on long-term solutions, what about addressing corruption?
Well, corruption thrives in environments where transparency and accountability are lacking.
Yeah.
We need to strengthen democratic institutions, promote transparency in government, and hold those in power accountable for their actions. This also means addressing the undue influence of money in politics. It ensures that policy decisions are made in the best interests of the people, not just the wealthy elite.
So things like campaign finance reform, lobbying regulations, and measures to increase transparency in government spending.
You got it. And finally, we can't ignore the importance of fair labor practices.
Right.
This means advocating for policies that protect workers' rights, ensure fair wages, and promote safe working conditions. It's about creating a system where everyone has a chance to earn a decent living and contribute to society.
So basically, we need to create an economic system that values fairness, opportunity, and dignity for all,
Yes,
not just a privileged few.
precisely.
Ah,
And that is the ultimate takeaway from Rome's experience.
true. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the grandeur of ancient Rome to the complexities of modern economies,
Yeah.
it's clear that the issue of economic inequality has a long and winding history.
And it's a story that's still being written. The choices we make today will shape the kind of society we create for tomorrow. Will we repeat the mistakes of the past, or will we learn from them and forge a more just and equitable future?
That's a question we all have to ask ourselves. This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. What stood out to you the most from our exploration of Roman economic inequality?
Honestly, what struck me most is how, even though ancient Rome might seem like a world away,
Yeah.
their struggles with economic inequality
Yay.
resonate so deeply with the challenges we face today.
Totally.
It's fascinating how looking back at their history
Mm-hmm.
can hold up such a clear mirror
Yeah.
to our own societies.
Yeah.
We see those same patterns of wealth disparity, power imbalances, and social unrest reflected back at us.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving when you think about it.
It is.
So much for those comforting historical distances.
Right.
What can our listener do
Yeah.
with all of this new knowledge
Uh-huh.
about Rome and economic inequality?
Okay.
What actions can they take
Mm.
to address these issues
Right.
in their own communities or even on a larger scale?
That's a great question. I think it really boils down to two key things: engagement and awareness.
Okay.
First and foremost, stay informed
Okay.
about these issues, both locally and globally.
So do your research, read articles,
Yes.
keep listening to podcasts like this one, and
Exactly.
educate yourself.
Yeah, and once you're informed,
Mm-hmm.
find ways to engage.
Okay.
You could support organizations that are working to address economic inequality,
Right.
advocate for policies that promote fairness and opportunity,
Yeah.
and even just have conversations with friends, family, and colleagues about these issues.
Right.
Even small actions can make a difference.
It's about raising awareness,
Yeah.
sparking dialogue,
Yeah.
and ultimately pushing for change.
Uh,
I think it can feel overwhelming to tackle these big systemic issues.
Yeah, for sure.
But Rome's story shows us that change is possible.
Absolutely.
It might not be easy, and it often requires a collective effort. But it takes people who are willing to speak out, challenge the status quo, and work together to create a more just and equitable world.
That's right.
We've journeyed back in time,
Mm-hmm.
explored the intricacies of ancient Rome, and unearthed some valuable lessons that are as relevant today as
Yeah.
they were centuries ago.
Absolutely.
We've given our deep diver plenty to ponder,
Uh-huh.
but I want to leave them with one final provocative thought.
Okay, go for it.
Listener, we've seen how Rome's failure to address inequality contributed to its downfall.
Right.
But what if they had succeeded? What if the Gracchi brothers' reforms had taken root?
Yeah.
Imagine a Rome where wealth was distributed more fairly
Okay.
and opportunity was accessible to all.
Uh-huh.
Would it have survived?
Good question.
And more importantly, what can we learn from their mistakes as we try to build a more equitable future for ourselves?
It's a question worth exploring.
Until next time, deep divers, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world. Thanks for joining us. That's